I would say spend your time not being a piece of crap and understanding why you're not a piece of crap
Sage advice.
instead of figuring out how you can trick the world.
Right.
Really, the people that win in just about every area of life are the people whose subjective view of the world most closely matches up to what the world objectively is. And so if you can look at yourself and other people and the world around you in a way that's as close to the way that it really is, instead of the biased way that you taught yourself to think that it is, you'll have the best outcomes. Welcome back to the Mindfully Masculine podcast. This is Charles. In this episode, Dan and I will continue to discuss Dating Essentials for Men by Dr. Robert Glover. And we're going to focus on chapter 7, the name of which is Use the Secret Women Don't Want You to Know to Your Advantage, which Dan and I both find a little clickbaity, maybe cringy, but we'll discuss what Dr. Glover gets into. Some of those topics will include common myths about women, emotional versus logical thinking, and the accompanying gender stereotypes, mental health and gender differences, authenticity in dating and relationships, security and stability in romantic relationships, the icing not cake philosophy, media influence and unrealistic romantic expectations, and other topics. Please check out our website, mindfullymasculine.com, to find our audio episodes, video episodes, and anything else we feel like sharing. Thanks and enjoy.
Hey, Charles, how's it going?
Still going great, Dan. Thanks. How are you doing?
I am doing great.
One of the first sections of chapter 7, which we're about to cover, Dr. Glover's editor made a word plural by adding an apostrophe S instead of just an S. And so let's talk about that for an hour, because I fixate on that when people do that. Apostrophes do not make plurals, they make possessives, Dan.
Yeah, listen, if it's somebody writing something like an email or a text, whatever, not a big deal. But if you're publishing it, that's a little bit of a faux pas in my book.
The first subsection in this chapter is myths about women, MYTH apostrophe S.
What?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know a myth.
Something? Yeah, it can't. But yeah,
other than our attention at this point.
Actually, it drives me. It really, grammatically, it is one of my biggest pet peeves. Yeah, I see it a lot with like days of the week, like how you should spend your Sundays with an apostrophe S.
Oh,
yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about some of these myths about women. And again, the chapter title is Use the Secret Women Don't Want You to Know to Your Advantage.
They're better at grammar. Is that the first secret?
Often they are. I do find that, typically written communication with women is usually better than written communication with men.
Fair enough. I can't disagree with that.
Okay, so myth number 1 is that women are inherently superior to men. I don't know anybody that believes this or would say that. So I don't know how widespread of a myth it is. I guess his position is that bad daters and inexperienced daters and men who are not confident in dating, they may live as if women are superior to men, but I don't know anybody that...
But it's such a blanket statement. In what ways are they superior? So that's the thing is, I think there's a lot of other things you need to unpack if you are walking around with that type of real general type of feeling, because everybody's different, right? So you can't say one woman might be better than you at one thing and you might be better than another dude. Come on. Yeah, I think that's...
Yeah, I would say
I don't know what that would be necessarily. Could be some sort of trauma as a child or some sort of really bad experiences that make you feel like women are inherently superior than men. There's going to be a significant reason why you're thinking that.
Yeah, I would say so too. Without follow-up, like you said, superior in what way and superior in what part of life. And yeah, I would say, if you are walking around, and I think that's a self-limiting belief, but I would go as far to say the opposite. Women are inherently inferior to men. If you're walking around with that one bouncing around in your head, that's a self-limiting belief too. And both of those are going to severely cripple your ability to engage in fulfilling relationships.
Yeah, generalizing in general is just not a great idea, right? Now, but again, like you said, that kind of goes back to our self-limiting beliefs and our ability to feel like we've got the world figured out. It's real easy to do that when you've got these really big blanket generalizations.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's not going to get you where you at least say you want to go.
Correct.
It's not going to help to think that all women are great and all men are trash, or all men are great and all women are any of those. Yeah, they're a big blind spot in your game.
And if that's what you feel, like, what are you supposed to do about it? If that's a real
Right.
belief, then it sounds to me also the corollary of that is there's nothing you can do about it. That's just the way it is. And at that point, it's almost like you're in this hopeless position. So you're just going to go throughout life looking for a way to be subservient to a woman. Is that like your approach then?
Yeah, and I would say it can even go in the opposite direction where, okay, if I believe that all women are superior to men, therefore the only men that can have women are the ones who are really good at tricking them and into thinking that they're better.
Yeah.
The only way I can get a woman is to trick her into thinking that I'm not a piece of crap. So therefore, I'm going to spend my time trying to hone the skills and the techniques and the tricks for getting to act like I'm worth more than I actually am. I would say spend your time not being a piece of crap and understanding why you're not a piece of crap
Sage advice.
instead of figuring out how you can trick the world.
Right.
Really, the people that win in just about every area of life are the people whose subjective view of the world most closely matches up to what the world objectively is. And so if you can look at yourself and other people and the world around you in a way that's as close to the way that it really is, instead of the biased way that you taught yourself to think that it is, you'll have the best outcomes.
Yeah.
And really the only way you can do that is by practicing engaging with the world as often as you can, and also be willing to let go of what you're convinced is the way things are and look for evidence to say, I might have this wrong. I might need to edit the way that I see the world and get it to more line up with the way the world actually is. Okay, the next myth number 2, women are complicated. Here's the deal. People are complicated and also quite simple. And you need to be able to hold both of those opinions in your head at the same time in a way that makes sense. Because, we talked about it, I think, with the very last book we covered, The Man's Guide to Women. There's not some deep mystery to how women work or how they choose to operate or the decisions they make that is just completely unfathomable to men. And they're just so complicated that we can never figure out. No, number one, you could ask them and assume that given some thought and some self-examination, they can give you answers that are valuable and that make sense and that are true, which I've found to be the case. Most women that if you go to the effort of asking a woman what makes her tick and what is she interested in and what does she prioritize, number one, she'll appreciate you asking. And number two, in my experience, she'll give some pretty deep thought to trying to give you an accurate answer. Now, again, we don't all have ourselves figured out. At some level, we're going to do things and behave in ways that we don't even understand. And I think that's natural and normal to understand. That's the way people work. But when you ask somebody like, hey, I want to connect to you and understand you more deeply, most people, and women especially, will find that a good use of their time to try to come up with a good answer for you. So, the idea that women are chaotic and mysterious and just they're so complicated that you can't figure them out is just it's a lazy way out to stop you from having to figure it out. One thing I've said before online to people is, why is it that the same guy who complains about how complicated and hard to understand women are, if you ask them, what was the last nonfiction book you've read that was written by a woman? In many cases, they will say, oh, I've never read a nonfiction book written by a woman.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or a nonfiction book. Oh, almost. Right.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing too, is I think the key here is realizing that the tool set that you have available to you and that you're using may not be the right ones to help you understand what a woman goes through and what they deal with and what they think about and how they behave. So that's the thing, is if you are closed-minded and not willing to consider other ideas and listen, read and do some research on it and build your skill set. Yeah, a car is complicated to everybody who's not a mechanic.
Exactly.
A mechanic has studied some cars before. So to him, it might, or her, it might not be a big deal. And it's no different.
You're right. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I love the quote that everything is a conspiracy theory when you understand how nothing works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because, yeah, if you're trying to get some insight into how something operates, but you don't know anything about it, then all you can really do is, oh, there's an earthquake and a flood. It must be the sun god must be angry for some reason.
You really revert back into being a caveman at that point.
Exactly. So here's something he says that I'd like to get your take on. In general, women have much more access to the right hemisphere of their brains than most men do. Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Okay.
The right side is the emotional side of the brain. Therefore, women's thinking and logic tends to be influenced more by feelings than a man's does.
Okay.
I don't know if I agree with that. That seems like a bit of a leap to me. And the idea that, speaking again in general terms, men are more logical and women are more emotional, that doesn't seem to play out that way in my own experience.
Okay.
And I thought about this quite a bit on the long drive over this morning. Here's how I'm going to say it. You remember Peanuts, the Peanuts characters, Snoopy, Charlie Brown, and all that. Linus had this blanket that he would carry around with him for security, even though he was a little too old to, by most standards, to be walking around with a blanket. He did. What I would say is that not that men are more logical and women are more emotional, but I would say that men, we use logic and order as our security blanket more frequently than women do.
Okay.
And women use connection and emotion as their security blanket more often than men do. But to say that men are inherently more logical, rational, reasonable, and women are more chaotic, emotional than men, it just doesn't play true for me. And often the men who spend the most time insisting on how logical they are seem to be the most emotional men that I've ever met.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think everything exists on a continuum. Right. And so I don't know if you can say one is typically more than another. I think you need to really look at yourself and figure out, hey, how do I like to typically deal with situations? How do I soothe myself?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And it could be you might need more of the belly breathing and for the soothing piece on the emotion side. Other times you might need to do something. You might need to make sense of something. You might need to employ that logic. And then
I definitely do that. Yes.
It'll vary based on the situation as
If
well.
if I'm in a stressful situation, I feel better by, okay, how can I bring some order and some logic to this?
Yes.
And that will make me feel more confident that I can predict what's going to happen next. Where I've known some women where I wouldn't say the opposite is true, but definitely okay, let me understand the emotional dynamics and the connections that are in these people-centered connections, and that will make me feel more comfortable in this situation.
So what I will say is that I think typically in our society that it's been more accepted for women to express their emotions outwardly
Certainly, yes.
and with other people than it has for men. And so I think based on that, it might appear that women typically are more emotional than men are, right? But that's only because that's what we're seeing, because that's what's been socially acceptable.
Yeah, and I would say,
So
and I would even go so far as to say the opposite, where it's more socially acceptable for women to come to a situation with their emotions is more smiled upon than women saying, okay, we need to look at this. We need to look at this logic.
yeah,
Hold on. That makes me
could
uncomfortable to hear a woman say that.
yeah,
I think so much of this is really, we've got these cultural modes of operating that we're just also used to, that we're also invested in keeping them going, whether in a given situation, whether they're actually true or not. And so that's where,
yeah.
again, the idea that men are logical and women are emotional, when it comes to any high stakes situation, it feels like, yeah, there's the men in the situation who want to remain in control of the situation have a very good reason to maintain that dichotomy of men are the logical ones, women are the emotional
Mhm.
ones. If I want you to continue letting me be in charge and not have some woman usurp my authority, then there's a pretty good argument for me to say, hey, and here's why men are more logical than women.
Yeah.
Vis-a-vis, I also get to stay in charge. Again, I think there's some,
Of course, there's elements of that. Yeah, for sure.
but again, in the guys that I see most invested in that narrative, it doesn't take a lot of pushing and prodding for them to get real emotional real fast.
Yeah, I think, whereas I've seen women who actually do employ logic when things are stressful. I've seen that happen naturally, and I think it's just more about the kind of training that you've had and how often I think a lot of times it's more socially acceptable for men to push their emotions aside and then focus on the logical stuff. And that's just because that's what we've been doing for so long. It doesn't mean we're not feeling those emotions. It's just that's just what we've been trained and are
Correct.
used to doing.
Yes.
Whereas women, it might be more so I'm going to then address the emotions in a different way and not push them aside. So I'm going to deal with the emotions in a different way. So I think again, and everything I think really, like I said, exists on a continuum. Look, the best strategy is really try to evaluate every situation individually for what it is. And that means also evaluating that person and what kind of, if you're evaluating somebody to be a partner or a girlfriend for you or somebody that you're going to date, look and see the way they handle things and don't just go in with these assumptions that they might be this or might be that. Look for real world evidence. And unfortunately, that takes time because especially at the beginning, whenever everything at the beginning of a relationship where everything's hunky dory, you might not have a lot of those situations where you need to see how that person reacts in a stressful situation or just even need to employ a lot more logic than for a home buying decision or a car buying decision. You might not run into that early on in the relationship, and it's hard to figure out.
Yes, it's very hard to figure out. That brings us into what has been encouraged and discouraged based on your gender. He also mentioned some of the mood disorders or mental illness challenges that women have to struggle with. And again, this is beating that myth of how complicated women are. And I looked it up and it said the stat I saw was that women are three times more likely to suffer from mental health issues. But my initial reaction to that is, are they three times more likely to have the issue or are they three times more likely to be diagnosed?
A big difference.
Yes, there's a huge difference
Yeah.
because if men have more socially acceptable options for dealing with their mental health challenges that do not include going to a professional and getting diagnosed, I could see why that would maybe skew the numbers because
Sure.
and look, man, I look at my own group of friends and associates from work, and it seems like the women are much more likely to be getting treatment for, seeing a therapist, seeing a counselor, where the guys that are not,
Yeah.
you can look at them and say pretty easily, oh, you've got some stuff you probably need to talk to somebody about,
Yeah.
but they're just so much less likely to actually do it. So when I see those statistics, I wonder, okay, where's this coming from? And
Yeah.
are we drawing the appropriate distinction between suffering from versus being diagnosed with?
Yeah.
And I would say we're probably not because, again, guys can learn how to hide their issues in socially acceptable ways and feel the pressure to do so. And so, are women inherently more likely to experience these problems or are they just more likely to get help for these problems?
I would say it's more likely to get help because they're just used to feeling comfortable communicating about
Right.
them. And
Yeah,
guys aren't.
exactly. And so I would say anecdotally,
Yeah.
it seems like a pretty even split between people who have mental health challenges and people who don't.
And part of that too is I think coming from a background of where men are not supposed to be perceived as weak in any way, and that plays into this as well. Like that, if you've got an issue, that shows that's a chink in the armor. So basically, it's then it takes more effort and more courage, whatever that is, coming to that realization and being able to talk about, hey, I've got an issue. I'm not perfect. I have a weakness that and I'm okay addressing it. That to all insecurities that we all have already.
Correct.
I can see why guys a lot of times resist going, and the same thing, even going to a doctor. Never mind a therapist, right? Like for a
Exactly.
medical doctor, the
Exactly. Yeah.
same concept applies. I think here.
Yeah. And I would love it if our society could change the narrative a little bit and even if you still want to quote unquote target men with this, fine. It's like, I would rather live in a society that says men should not be weak than a society that says men should not look weak.
Yes,
I'm
that's great. That's
I'm
great.
okay. I'm okay saying men should not be weak. I'm fine with that, whether that's emotionally, physically, whatever. We want to encourage men to be strong emotionally, strong physically,
And that means doing something about the
doing
weakness.
something about it, not engaging.
Fake.
Let's build multi-million billion dollar industries on how to help men not look weak. Let's instead focus on helping men not be weak.
Yeah.
Because right now, when you look at the big podcasts, big industries, big clothing. It's all what can we do to help men dress up to not look weak
Mm,
instead of what can we do to help men not be weak? Because
mhm.
man, there's no more dangerous of a man than a man who looks strong but is actually weak. That guy is dangerous to his work family, his home family. He's dangerous to everybody.
Yeah,
The guy who is invested so heavily in not looking weak are the worst guys you can spend your time around. And I get the impulse though. I get how
yeah.
good it feels to not look weak. And it's pretty easy. All you have to do is change the things you say and the way you dress, and you can be a guy who looks strong. But to actually be a guy who is strong, that takes a lot more work. And there's not as much money to be made on those
Mm.
guys. Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about what it is that women actually want and why they're not complicated. Glover makes a good point that when a woman is behaving in a way that doesn't seem to make sense to you, it's probably because she feels lacking in security and stability. And so if you can acknowledge that and say, okay, if she's acting out in a way that doesn't seem to make sense based on who she's been previously and what she has expressed as important to her, then yeah, there's a good indication that what's going on is she doesn't feel safe or secure or stable. And I should probably, if I'm going to be in a relationship with her, I should figure out what it is that she needs and what my role is in helping her find those things.
Yeah.
And I think a generalization that women are security seeking creatures is pretty fair. It's not going to be the case for all of them, but I think certainly if you want to adopt the mindset of, okay, if she's behaving in a way that doesn't make sense to me, then she probably isn't feeling the level of security that she needs. So I'm gonna figure out what role I can play.
Yeah, I think men also seek security and trustworthiness as well, just
Absolutely.
maybe in a little bit of a different way at times. And how critical that is to any type of relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, father child
Yeah.
relationship, all of that needs to really be based on do you trust this other person? And when that is called into question based on behavior or situations, that's when things get weaker.
Yeah. And this is where the covert contracts that he talked about in No More Mr. Nice Guy comes in. If you see the woman in your life, or yeah, we'll focus on the woman in your life, behaving in a way that you think is inconsistent with what you come to
Mhm.
expect from her or what she says she wants, the worst thing you can do is really try to manipulate her into feeling or acting quote unquote better. Oh, I'll take time away from work. I'll drop hanging out with my friends. I'll start turning my back on my hobbies and neglecting those so that I can spend more time with her and soothe her so that she feels better. No, what you can do is ask her what she needs, believe what she tells you at face value, and then really balance between giving her the space she needs to feel her feelings and be as strong as you can emotionally when you're in her presence. And that will ramp up her ability to feel security in the situation that she's in. Be trustworthy, like we learned from the last book.
Yeah.
Do what you say you're gonna do, and be who you say you are. And that can do a lot to alleviate those feelings that she might be experiencing as a lack of security.
Yeah, and a lot of that does get conveyed in ways that you may not be aware of, which is if you're looking at your phone when she's telling you something,
Correct.
you aren't being present, even though you might physically be in the same room. And then you could come back in the argument when she says, hey, you're never present. Oh, we spent an hour together. You didn't spend an hour together. You spent an hour with your phone and she spent
Correct.
an hour talking to you.
Exactly.
And so there's a big difference in terms of that quality time. And in order to create that sense of security and that connection, that means paying attention, being there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if anything, it's almost probably worse that you're there looking at the phone rather than if you weren't there at all, right? You know?
Especially if her love language is quality time.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah, on top of that, but even if it's not
yeah,
your
even if it's
specific
not, but yeah,
love language, regardless, put the shoe on the other foot. If you wanted to if she was looking at her phone while you were telling her something and something that you thought was especially something important to you, and even if it wasn't important to you, just a basic level of respect. And now it's just that's gonna spiral, like, our primitive brain is gonna now also play into that, and they're gonna spiral into thinking, "Oh my god, what something probably worse than, oh, he was just doing really well on his game on his phone." It could be something, "Oh my god, who's he talking to?"
correct.
And you don't and now that has to be that has to be dealt with, those heightened emotions. And so it really it doesn't take much other than paying attention, being present, and really making an effort.
Yeah. It really is almost, it's worse to give somebody a weak version of what they need than to not give it to them at all. And
Because you're basically saying this is all you get from me. This is like all you're worth.
exactly. Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Myth number 3 is that women are naturally good at relationships. I would go, I see where he's going with this and I agree with him because the idea that women are more willing to talk about relationships and more willing to investigate the dynamics of relationships, but that doesn't necessarily make them better at relationships. Women do have an advantage over men in getting better at relationships, in that asking for help or looking for resources to be better at relationships is not as stigmatized for women as it is for men. Yeah, just sitting on the couch watching Oprah or Dr. Phil isn't going to inherently make you better at relationships, but it does put you in the orbit of experts in a way that men don't typically spend their time. I mean, you pick out 10 random episodes of the Joe Rogan podcast, not very many of those 10, if any, are going to be some relationship expert who's on there trying to talk about how you can be better at relationships. It's going to be more about taking cold showers and training for a 100-mile run and did Bigfoot assassinate John F. Kennedy. It's not going to be a lot of, in male spaces, there's not a lot of people talking about relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think the barrier to entry for women when they decide, hey, I do want to learn more about relationships, is quite a bit lower than it is for men.
And they more support to keep going in that pursuit of knowledge.
Yes. All the guys I hang out with on a fairly regular basis, we all enjoy talking about relationships, but I understand that most men's social circles are not like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think just because women are willing to talk about it does not necessarily mean it's going to translate into the way they behave in relationships, but it could. And guys who never seek out that information, never talk about it, and never, read books or listen to books about it, I feel like their ability to improve is going to be a little bit lower than a woman who does put herself into relationships.
I would kind of disagree with Glover on this point.
I do too. Yeah. He says that just because you are obsessed with baseball stats doesn't make you good at hitting a major league curveball. Like, okay, that's true, but
He just talked about the visualization, though. Remember a little bit, right? So it's just, okay, you're visualizing now,
yeah,
maybe hitting that ball over and over again. And that's literally what you're doing. You're picturing things as you're reading them, listening to them. And the more you're exposing yourself to them, yes. All right. You might not be good as somebody who is like a professional therapist in that area. But if you are constantly bombarding yourself in your brain with information and concepts, and you're visualizing things, and you're hearing and watching examples of people doing conflict resolution and communicating, yeah, you're going to be better than somebody who watches baseball.
yes, I would agree.
Put some money on that.
Yeah, because part of it is, okay, I don't think reading a book or listening to a podcast about relationships is not the same, and expecting that to make you better at relationships is not the same as going over baseball stats making you better at being a hitter. But if you are going on YouTube and watching videos by hitting coaches talking nonstop about how to be a better hitter, that probably will have some positive impact on your ability to hit because it's more apples to apples.
Yeah, that's a better analogy than just looking at stats. So that'd be like somebody doing scientific research and going, "Oh, women's brains are more apt to do this than that." That's stats. That's not actually watching, which is not what they do. They're engaged in
exactly
the things like you said, the videos and the culture around relationships. Yeah, that's not an accurate
To be fair,
statement.
though, he does say watching Oprah, watching Dr. Phil, and most books about relationships. Although Oprah had some pretty smart people on there giving practical advice, and I don't know that Dr. Phil does. Dr. Phil is more.
But he had some basic principles that he even mentions is, how's that working out for you? And
that is a big question to ask
it's just a
yourself.
fantastic question to ask, to break your patterns and to make you aware of, oh, wait a minute, I'm not getting what I say I want.
Yeah, watching an episode of Dr. Phil where
I don't need much more than that from him, but I think that was a pretty powerful question.
Yeah, watching an episode of his show where he basically gets some drill instructor to yell at a kid who's not behaving, that probably does not help out your relationships very much. But yeah, asking people, a lot of the guests he's going to have on his show, and I don't watch his show. I've never really watched his show, but I've seen clips of it where it's pretty extreme behavior and basically just
There's a lot of entertainment.
Yeah, exactly,
That's
exactly. It's not the same as
yeah.
Oprah Winfrey having Brene Brown on her show and talking about shame for an hour. I think, yeah, you will probably take away some stuff from this. It's going to make you a better person even if it's just interacting with your own feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
He's
say,
this the boat on this one.
I think so. I think so. And I also don't want him devaluing the use of books and podcasts and even TV shows in learning more about relationships.
And look, that old saying of basically you are the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. You know what? If you are listening to, and I just went through this with my sister actually the other day, was she's I don't really surround myself with anybody who's better than me. I'm like, wait a minute, you listen to podcasts, you listen to books, audiobooks about from personal development stuff. Those are your mentors. Even though you are not physically talking to them in person, you are still hearing the best of their information. And it's even better than if you were friends with them. So you're sitting at a bar with Brene Brown, you're not going to be talking about shame the whole time. You're going to be right. You're going to be, oh, these nachos were really good. That's the thing. It's like you're getting the best of them consolidated if you're listening to these books and these podcasts. I count that as people you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of looking at it for sure, especially if you're really immersed in to consuming everything that they're putting out, which I do get that way with some influencers and experts sometimes, where it's, man, something they said really resonated with me, or I heard them on an interview, and now I'm going to go out and get every book. I'm going to listen to every podcast episode, and just, yeah, that I definitely spend more time with some of those public intellectuals and experts than I do with a lot of friends that I don't see.
And that being said, you're going to be then maybe not an average, but you will definitely raise your level of information and competency in certain areas.
All right, let's hit the rest of these myths as quickly as we can, rapid fire. Number 4 is women expect perfection from men. That's silly. Nobody wants to be around a perfect person. It's exhausting and it makes you feel bad about yourself. So that's true for even beautiful, successful women are not looking for guys that are perfect.
And put the shoe on the other foot. If you were looking for the perfect woman, you'd feel a little insecure about the whole time that you're with that person.
Yeah.
So she's not going to be looking for the perfect guy either, because that's not going to make her feel great about herself either.
Correct.
If you could do no wrong, which is completely perfection doesn't exist.
All we may say that, yeah, well, and if we say we're looking for the perfect partner, we're looking for the perfect partner for us. We're not looking for one who's perfect all the time by any means. Myth number 5, friends to lovers. The idea of just trying to get in with a gal and being her friend, because then eventually maybe you two will kick it off, or lightning will strike and you'll go from being friends to being romantic partners. Now, I've done this before. I've gone from being somebody's friend to being somebody's boyfriend, but in my experience, it never works when you go into the friendship with that intention. If you go into the friendship to be friends with somebody, then yes, something may spring up from that eventually. But the problem is if you go into the friendship thinking, I really like to be her boyfriend, so maybe if I become her friend first, that'll happen. It usually doesn't, because number 1, you get completely obsessed with that friendship that you have with her at the expense of dating and going out with girls in a romantic scenario, which is not good, because you're investing all your time and your effort into this friendship when friendship isn't what you're actually after. And so you also take practice time away from engaging in other relationships, and
again, put the shoe on the other foot. So now, so a girl, let's say, wants to be your friend and is acting as a friend for you for months or years, and then all of a sudden, or wants to change the foundation that they've built and your interpretation of what your relationship is. Again, it's a violation of your trust.
Exactly.
and the security that you've built. And so that's never really going to go well.
Yeah. And exactly. And it is inherently deceptive to treat someone as a friend when you find them attractive and you're attracted to them and you want to relate. Like the previous partner that we were friends first. And one thing I would see guys do is, even though we were friends, we were still flirty. We weren't looking for a relationship from each other, but we were flirty with each other. And I didn't behave as if every time we hang out, I'm going to take my genitals and lock into a safe and not act like a man around her. I acted like a man around her. And I was not dishonest about the fact that she was an attractive, interesting person to be around. I just wasn't looking for a relationship from her. She wasn't looking for one from me. So we were real men and we were a real man and a real woman who were in a friendship with each other. And so I didn't feel like I had to hide any parts of myself, where when I see guys crushing on a girl and be in her friend zone, a big part of the time is they're hiding who they actually are. And that's a vibe that you can't choose not to put that off.
And here's the thing. I don't know of many women who don't really know what you really want.
Exactly.
If you are in that position, I don't think you're fooling anybody.
It's almost like they have, yeah, it's like we're both going to have a covert contract with each other where I pretend I don't see what you really want and I pretend not to be after what I actually am after.
Mhm.
And it's just
Yeah, that's a good point.
what a
Yeah.
vibe killer that is. Where both of you've got this unspoken agreement of I won't acknowledge that you want me and I won't acknowledge that I don't want you in this way. And we'll just be friends. We'll hang out. We'll be social. But there's this other thing going on that we're both going to pretend isn't there.
And here's the thing is even so let's say best case scenario, you are able to fool that other person and they really think you're just a friend.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh,
One day the reveal comes.
right. And it's like, holy shit, you've been lying to me for how many months or years?
Yeah.
What else could you potentially lie to me about or be deceptive about?
I thought you found me valuable.
are you?
I thought you found me valuable as a friend. And now it turns out you never really did.
Oh, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
It's, oh, now my self-worth is you really wanted just something else from me.
Correct.
And all the other things that
Yeah.
I thought.
You're willing to tolerate me as
you-
a friend to get me as a girlfriend.
Yeah, that's, I don't know if that just comes from a lot of the rom-coms that we watched growing up, that friend to
Yeah.
the girl realizes, oh my God, this guy, or
He was there for me all along. Yeah. I've never seen it happen in real life.
yeah.
Where the guy accepted a friendship because that's all he could get. And then she
Yeah.
eventually,
Realized after she's been heartbroken from all the other people that, oh,
think about the most striking examples, probably Ross and Rachel, where the first 1 or 2 seasons of Friends, where he was absolutely in love with her and he would pretend that he wasn't. And then in that one episode, she sees the video of him putting on his tuxedo to take her to prom because she got stood up by her prom date. And then, oh, that's such a compassionate thing, loving thing for him to do. Now, boom, all of a sudden I'm in love with him.
right. No,
It doesn't work that way.
unfortunately.
Or no, I'm okay. I'm going to say, fortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, well,
I like it the way that it works.
well, no,
But I'm saying, once you see it and you understand it, it's like, no, that the way it actually works is better than the way that.
no, but a lot of times, but growing up as a a teenage boy in that, oh, you could do one thing and like stand outside her house with the radio over your head, and all of a sudden it's going to change everything, and that's a fantasy or a dream that we were basically programmed. Same thing with, I think, a lot of the Disney princess lives and stuff like that for girls. And that's why I say it's unfortunate, because it's, oh, I've been wasting my time thinking that this is what the world is like.
Exactly.
And this is how the world operates. And now, holy shit, I got to figure something else out.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've been wrong for how many years?
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's scary.
The surest path to success with dating is you being open and honest about your intentions and what you want and getting to rejection as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
That's the way that it works. Let's see. That's the last of the myths, but the last part of this chapter is something you and I repeat all the time. Icing, not cake. A good woman in your life should be the icing on the cake and not the cake itself. Yeah. And I have found the most attention I've gotten from women in my life has been once I got to the age where I decided to focus on myself, my career, my interests, my hobbies, the traveling I like to do, the hiking I like to do, the podcast you and I have. The more time I spend investing in the things that I need to make my life what I want it to be, the more I get attention from women who look in, that guy's got some stuff going on that's pretty exciting. I'd like to be around that.
Or a part of that.
Or a part of that.
Yeah, because then you've got inherent value to give. And then it's not the fluffy icing piece that is created based on the relationship that hasn't even been built yet.
Exactly.
So yeah, bake that cake.
And the opposite should be true too. You should look for a partner who's got their own cake.
Right.
You guys provide icing
Correct.
for each other
Yes.
that is complimentary. And settle down, Dan. You provide icing.
What?
Your icing tastes good on her cake, and her icing tastes good on your cake.
I love me some frosting.
I usually, like, if work's having a birthday party, I always pick the pieces with the least amount of
Oh, really?
icing. Yeah, I don't like the ice. I'm more of a cake guy.
Depends on the cake and depends on the icing. So if it's a cream cheese icing, I'll like on a carrot cake. Yeah, load that up. I like that. But just like a plain vanilla icing, whatever.
You know, with that foamy kind of icing that you get on like grocery store sheet cakes. I don't like that. I'll take a piece from the middle that has not all that much icing. But
like the big like candy floured icing, like they put on the corners and stuff like that. I'm not. Yeah,
I don't like that. All right. I think we are good to stop there, Dan. Our next chapter is going to be reasons not to pursue hot women. I don't like the title of this chapter either, because once you get into the chapter, he's not talking about what most people, I would say, call hot women. He's talking about vain women, reasons not to pursue vain women.
Correct.
And that I agree with 1,000,000%. Hot women, again, as we conventionally discuss the term hot, I date hot girls and I like it. It's vain women that I have no time for.
And I think people, you got to remember, one person's opinion of what is hot is different than another's. There's some, I think, legitimately objective.
Some ways that we all match up on it, but some ways we don't.
But right. Absolutely. Keep that in mind too. Just you're not going to be attractive to every woman. You're not going to find every woman attractive to the same thing, or to what degree.
Yeah, and I've talked about, I think on the show before, I don't really buy into the concept of leagues. Oh, she's out of my league, I'm out of her league. There are no leagues. People have preferences. They have things like, I don't believe that any woman is too good or too attractive for me to date. She just might have preferences that don't match up with who I am, and that's fine. But the idea of, oh, she's too hot to date me, I don't buy it. Yeah, I don't look into it.
Our brain likes to make shortcuts to save energy, and just be aware of that and try to avoid making those shortcuts.
Yeah, that's great advice. All right, we'll stop there for today, and we'll do chapters 8 and 9 when I see you next week.
Sounds good, sir.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the entire episode. We appreciate it. Again, please check out our website, mindfullymasculine.com, for full audio and video episodes, as well as anything else that we decide to put there. Thanks, and talk to you next time.